Hey there, everybody, Paller here, and welcome back. So, on last Thursday, I started off my Dark Souls 2 walkthrough series. The videos didn't start going up till Friday, but I started recording them there. And I now have 4 videos up online. I think I've recorded 6 or 7. 6 sounds right. And I was going through, and as I'm editing, I've been watching them and everything, and I don't like how they're going. They're not flowing very well. I'm spending too much time going far too in depth in some things that I really shouldn't be covering all the time. It's just, the pacing on them is very bad. Rather than playing, I'm talking. And I want to stop doing that. I'm trying to change that up and everything. I want the videos to just move along. So, I'm going to be restarting the entire series. I'm going to get rid of those original 4 videos that are up. They're going to get deleted. And I'm going to recreate them. I'm going to delete the character, Paller, and I'm going to start over new. Before I do that, though, I'm going to create a lead-in video. This video is going to cover most of the things that I would be breaking down in that. I may still briefly scratch over these issues as they come up in-game, but it's not going to be nearly as in-depth as I'm going to go into here. So this is going to be like an introduction to Dark Souls. If you are familiar with Dark Souls 2, if you're just looking for, any hidden secrets you might have missed, or certain boss strategies that are going to be gone through and everything, then you probably don't need to watch this video. If you're new to the game, or you're just getting into it, this video may be helpful, as it'll cover some items. Alright. To begin with, let's just cover a few real basics. I wanted to go in here and just show you guys something I breezed through real quick in terms of the equipment window and a few of the other GUI item changes. The first thing in the GUI item that has been changed out is we now have 3 item slots, 4 ring slots, and 10 quick use slots. This has all been brought up. And on the surface, it looks to be a great change, and it really doesn't hurt. It's not a bad change, I guess is what I would say. However, it's not as useful as it may seem. Mainly because, especially down here when we look at the consumable items, to have 10 consumable items on this bar, and say you want to scroll through them and find a particular item you're going to use, Homeward Bone, we'll throw that on there, we'll throw the resin on there, and so forth. As you're moving through, and if you're fighting a certain enemy, you're fighting a boss, to start scrolling through and trying to move, in order to scroll through the whole thing, you're going to have to stand still for about 4 seconds. Or you got to kind of two-hand it like this, but then you don't have your thumb on this stick. It's just not practical. It really was overkill. For the most part, you're never going to want more than, I would say, 4 items down here. You might go 5. I normally keep 2 or 3. I tend to run with this, plus then 1 item for whatever area I'm currently in to help out. The same also goes for your weapon slots. Well, you stop exiting out of that menu there. Having a 3rd weapon slot, in theory, seems awesome. And in some cases, it's useful, but you're likely not to use it all that often. For example, if I'm fighting a boss and I open up with a few quick casts of my magic and then want to go to my main weapon, which would normally be your slot number 1, you have an extra item change out, which might not be all that very long, but depending on how large the weapon is, there does seem to be a little bit slower swap outs for some of those weapons and everything. It just adds in a little bit of an extra time, or you're in the heat of the battle, you might be expecting to go from your magic catalyst back to your primary weapon, and you end up with binoculars, or your bow and arrow. And it just, in actual application through gameplay, does not work out all that well. So that's the one thing I did want to cover. The 4 ring slots, this is all around approve of. This is great. I really like this. The double bow slots, so what this actually does down here is you can equip 2 different types of arrows, 2 different types of bolts. And if we pull out our bow and arrow now, you'll look underneath the bow and arrow in the lower left there, you'll see 2 different windows. And if I hold my bow, now if I use the left bumper to fire the arrows, I'm going to use the left most of those, which is just my standard wooden arrow. If I use my left trigger to fire, I'm going to use the right one of those 2, which is my fire arrows. So you can actually have 2 different ammos equipped and use them simultaneously without swapping them out. We'll go into bows and arrows a little bit later on. There's also been minor changes to the controls. I brought this up in the other video, but they're all going to be brand new. The two big changes that have gone through in terms of controls, one is the jump system. The jump system by default is now mapped to your left joystick click if you're using a controller. Your left joystick on controller, and you just have to be running a little bit, and you can go ahead and you can jump. They've also reduced the lead up in order to require a jump. In Dark Souls 1, from the time you started sprinting to when you could actually pull off a jump, it's been shortened. For the most part, as soon as you hit that quick stride, you can then jump now and perform that just fine. It takes a little getting used to if you've played a good bit of Dark Souls 1, but overall I think it's a positive change. The other change, which is kind of why I was heading this way, I don't know if I actually want to run out there and do it, has been a very minor changes to ladders. In the original Dark Souls, if you wanted to quick slide down ladders, you got on the ladder, and then without touching anything else, you held down B, or circle I think, on the Xbox or on the PS3 controller, whatever your sprint button is. So you would hold that down in order to slide down the ladder fast. If you were holding down on your joystick and then press and held B, it didn't matter. You would still just climb down the ladder at a normal speed. So if we get here, and right now I just hold B, nothing happens. If I hold B and down, I slide down very quick. If I'm going up, I can also go up. So what they've done is they now added in where you can both slide down quick, you can also use your stamina to climb up quick. As you can see, my stamina bar was sliding off. The other thing they've added in is if you're not moving and you tap, you can hop off ladders. Just something to keep in mind. You want to be cautious when doing that, as you can sometimes jump off a ladder at a very high height when you don't intend to, and fall to your death. Merchant changes, upgrade changes. I've covered this in another video in my lead-ups to this, but I'm going to reiterate. Your first playthrough through, every NPC you come across, especially merchants, exhaust their dialogue options. Talk to them until they repeat. Many of them will do different things when you exhaust it. There are a few that nothing comes from it, but for the most part something happens. For example, you will notice here I have a merchant. This is Melentia. And if you haven't played yet, she is one of the first merchants you'd come across out in the world. By exhausting all of her dialogue options and then killing the boss of her zone, she relocates back here to Majula, so you can then shop from her at any time. She also gains new items that she sells. I'm sorry, not new items, but greater amounts in her inventory. If you kill the zone boss but don't talk to her, she never relocates. The only way to get her back here is both together. Also, as you play through the game, if you spend enough souls with her and then talk to her, she will give you a item of appreciation, basically. She gives you a secret item, I'm not going to talk about what it is right now, just to thank you for shopping with her over time. And she's not the only one to do that. Also, this merchant in here, he's a great example. His inventory, every time you spend a certain amount of souls with him, at first I think it's 1,500. The next time you see him, his inventory will increase. If you then spend another 4,000 or 5,000 souls on him, his inventory will increase again. So even if you don't actually need a current item that a vendor has, it is worth spending some souls with them in order to increase their inventory. There will eventually also be a vendor that shows up back here that sells the upgrade shards and everything. With her inventory does increase, but it increases more based off bosses that you've killed and worlds you've killed and everything. That's not overly important at this point, but just keep that in mind. Coming off of talking to merchants, the other thing I want to talk about real quick is weapon upgrades. So in Dark Souls 1, if you wanted to upgrade a weapon to, say, Lightning Path, and I'm going to try to remember exactly how this went, first you had to upgrade the weapon to +10, and then you could convert it over to Lightning Weapon. Then from Lightning Weapon you could upgrade it +5 times, so you would have a +5 Lightning Halberd. Or if you wanted to go Magic, I believe you had to upgrade a weapon baseline to 5, then you could convert it over to Magic, and then Magic you could convert over to something else, and it gave you different options. But basically it branched out in a somewhat confusing fashion. I actually have a cheat sheet on my desktop from the original game showing how I wanted to, if you want to get a weapon, what ways you have to go in order to get it. It required a flowchart for me to remember, for me to know it, because I didn't know it off the top of my head. I never completely memorized it. All that's been changed out. You can now, they're now two separate things. So if you upgrade a weapon, they now only upgrade to plus 10. You go from 0 to plus 10. And then you can imbue the weapon with elemental powers, be it bleed, lightning, fire, dark, can all be added into weapons, but it's a completely separate thing. So, for example, I could take this short sword plus 1 right now, and if I have the blacksmith unlocked that allows me to do imbuing, I could take it to him and make it a short sword with bleeding plus 1. And then I can bring that short sword plus 1 back here, and I can make it a plus 2 short sword, or plus 3 short sword, that will both increase its bleeding and its standard effect. Now, for the most part, not for the most part, the way it breaks down is, so, this is a fire longsword. Do I have a longsword? No, I don't. Does he sell a longsword? He might sell a longsword. Buy item, longsword. So if we look here at the longsword has a 112 damage over there on the right-hand side here, right? However, this fire longsword I have acquired has only 86 or 78 damage on it, but it also has 78 fire damage. So if we add that up, we got, what, 148, that's 16, 156 damage total via. So what it does is, as you upgrade your weapon, if your weapon has, say you have a plus 5 mace that does 200 damage, and you take it and you go ahead and you imbue it with lightning, what it'll do is, out of that 200 damage, it'll make you have, like, instead of plus 200 damage, you'll have, say, a plus 130 base damage, and then plus 130 lightning damage. So overall, combined together, the two will add up to a greater amount than the standard. Now, it's not always a positive, though, to imbue weapons, as the way damage reduction is done, it means if you fight an enemy that has high lightning resistance, your weapon's actually going to do less damage, because they're both mitigating the physical damage and the lightning damage at the same time. You add in an extra mitigating factor there. So it's not as direct a boon as it might seem. You can also remove enchants from weapons now, but you no longer have to worry about, oh, I wanted to, like, you no longer have to worry about wanting to get a weapon to magic. Do you need it to be plus 5 or plus 10? You don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about embers, nothing like that. All of that has been removed. Tied in with weapons has also been a big change to the durability. This is one of the bigger game changes. If we come in here and, whoops, open the right menu, and we look at my fire longsword here, you'll see down here, whoops, come on. I want you to actually keep the fire long. Alright, you're going to be a pain in the butt about it, aren't you? Every time I touch the mouse. Alright, we're going to mouse there, then come around here. This is my durability rating. Right now I have 58 durability out of 60. And that 60 durability does not last very long. If we come up here and we whack the wall for a little bit, and you look down under my weapon, in the weapon UI there, you'll see a red bar underneath my longsword and a red bar underneath my shield. And you might actually be able to tell that as I'm hitting this, that red bar is slowly going down. That's my durability. Come on, open the right menu. Now you'll see, same spot, 54 out of 60 is my weapon durability. So just from those few hits, I lost 4 durability. The way it seems they have done the game is basically between each bonfire, if you use one weapon from one bar to the next bonfire, you should be able to kill everything between there and rest at the bonfire with your weapon normally at about 15% or so. Now this varies because every weapon has its own durability. Some weapons have 80 durability, some have 90, some have 50, some have 30. I've never seen any that low. But it varies. But in general, you're going to make it from one bonfire to the next with your weapon durability around 15 to 20%. The reason this is important is resting at a bonfire renews or restores the durability on your weapons. So now if we come back out here and we reopen this, you'll now notice my durability is back to 60 at 60. So as long as you don't break your weapons, you don't run them to 0 durability, you don't ever have to repair. If we come back in here, we can actually look. the blacksmith has a repair option. Repair weapon and armor. And I have no items that need a repair. So as long as you stop before they hit 0 and rest at a bonfire, you never have to spend souls on repairing. This is a change I'm actually not that fond of, as it means if you're working through a zone and you're looking for secrets and everything, you're going to end up with weapons close to breaking. They force you to rest at bonfires or use a different weapon. And I'm just not a big fan of that, but it's not a major gripe or problem. That'll go more into the reviews, though. Let's also talk a bit about the stat system. There's been a minor change to the stats. We're going to talk, I have almost 40,000 souls. Yeah. Level up. Okay, so in here, for the most part, we're looking at our primary stats and what has changed. There's been some minor adjustments for several reasons. First, vigor. This is stamina. This is your HP. Each point you put into this is going to give you a pretty good jump in your HP. Right now it's giving me 30. I think once you break vigor rank 20, it only gives you 20. And then once you break vigor rank 50, maybe 40, it only gives you 10. So it does slowly scale down. Well, let's see. So that's 30, that's 30, that's 30, 18, that's 30, and then that's 20, right? 50, no. So that's 20, or that's 30. And that's 20. So once you go from 20 to 21, you only get 20 instead of 30 out of it. So 20 is kind of your early initial break point that you want to get to. But it's your standard stamina, pretty straightforward. Endurance is still almost exactly what you would expect, with a minor change to this poison number, which we will come back to in a little bit. But this is your stamina. This also, I believe, has a break point at 20. So right now you can see we're getting 2 more per. Can we get to 20? We can't get there. I believe it also has a breakpoint where it reduces once you hit rank 20 there. Vitality is almost purely entirely your equip load. You notice here right now we're only at a vitality of 5, and we're at 46, 47. It goes up pretty quickly. This number here, as you're leveling out your character, basically what you're going to do is you're going to find what your equip load is going to be about. You're going to find 70% of that, and that's going to be where you set your vitality. We'll go into that 70% number here in a little bit. Attunements, this is your spell attunement slots. Quite nice. You get your first one at 10, your second one at 13, and your third one at 16. So you can see I have 3. And then I think the next one will be at 20. Yeah, so there's 20. So at rank 20, you have 4 spell attunement slots. This also changes a few other things. Notice it also gives us agility. We'll come back to that in a moment. It also gives us cast speed. This is very nice. This is cast speed for both your spells. It also, actually that might be agility. Let me talk about that later. I can't remember. Go back down. Strength, pretty straightforward. Dex, pretty straightforward. Adaptability. This is not entirely a new stat. Oh boy, I'm drawing a blank. There was a stat in Dark Souls 1 that every time you put a point in it, it boosted your defense in all your resists. It gave you curse, bleed, all of them. It gave you like 1 point in that. It was a stat you didn't use very often. Adaptability has been, it's been renamed adaptability and reworked. And this is going to go back into poise and agility. So, the adaptability is your primary stat for boosting both your agility and your poise. Agility is a new stat in the game. What they have done is they've taken how quickly you roll. They've mostly removed the effects of armor on how quickly you roll and put that instead into agility. If we actually read the tooltip for it here, you'll see agility boosts ease of evasion and other actions. So this boosts how quickly you roll. It boosts how quickly you drink Estus flasks. I believe it boosts how quickly you'll throw a consumable item. So if you have like a firebomb, how quickly you throw that. All of that is boosted by agility. Agility is a pretty darn good item for people that are going without shields, dual wielders, or two-handers, people that just tend to run around without a shield. They're going to want agility. Poise is what we used to know. Get rid of that. Poise is what we always knew. This reduces how much stamina reduction you get when you get hit by an attack. So if you have your shield up and you get hit, the higher your poise, the less damage to your stamina that attack's going to do. Boosting that is good for a high tanky class. Somebody that's wearing very heavy armor with a big shield, they're going to want high poise. So adaptability is a stat that people are probably going to want to look at. The reason I'm focusing so much on this, though, is if we watch here, where's my endurance at? It's at 10. So if we come up to, if we watch here, we're going through, as I go to 10, it's from 9 to 10, it increases from 2.7 to 3. If I then go from 3, 10 to 11, it doesn't climb up. If I come up here and put in a point in endurance, though, it climbs. Poise scales off of the lower of the two between adaptability and endurance. The same way agility, I'm almost positive of this, let me double check before I put this. Agility, oh no, it does still scale, but it scales much slower. Agility will scale better off the lower of the two. I wonder if enough endurance will increase poise. No, doesn't matter. So, adaptability is just an all-around good survival stat. Int and Faith, for the most part, unchanged. They have really boosted the number of resistances Faith helps with, which is quite nice. Basically everything but poison and magic. Faith is pretty nice. Something to keep in mind here. There are several NPCs that will only talk to you if you have 8 int or 8 faith. The primary mage trainer in the entire game, if you don't have a minimum of 8 int, he won't even talk to you. The hex trainer, when we're going to get into hexes in a moment, won't talk to you unless you have at least 8 int and 8 faith. And I'll explain that in a moment. So if you're looking to 100% the game, you're going to want to have a minimum of 8 int and 8 faith in any build you put. You don't have to go above 8, but you're going to want a minimum of that. I think I covered everything. Oh, there's one item I did actually miss that we want to go back into. When we were talking about all these stats and everything earlier in the sheet, I should have gone into this item right here. This is your soul memory. So you see your soul memory, souls that once dwelled within the flesh will always remain in memory. The original Dark Souls, and maybe to some extent Dark Souls, Demon Souls, had an issue where once it was out on PC, there was very quickly a modded save file that gave anybody that downloaded, they just had to put it in the right directory, I believe. I never used it, so I might be a little off on the actual uses of it. Basically, it gave them a soul level whatever their character was. So if it was like a warrior, it would have been like a soul level 8 or whatever. It gave them 999,999 souls. It also gave them max number of every item in the game. So it gave them like 99 Zweihanders. It gave them like 99 Artorias' great swords. It gave them all this stuff. It gave them 999 fire bombs. All of this in one save file that they then had. And they could go ahead and they could, with a soul level 7, 8, 10 guy, they could be equipping the best weapon, the best items in the game, fully tricked out to plus 10, plus 15, lightning plus 5. And then they could go and think, since their soul level was still very low, they could go and PvP, invade people that had no gear anywhere near them, and just wreck them. They were basically trolling them. Soul memory now is the new primary stat that they use for matchmaking. Soul level still comes into play to some extent, but it's mostly soul memory. What this is any soul your character has ever had on them, whether they picked them up and then got killed and you never recovered them, they were just left there on the ground and lost, put them into upgrading weapons, put them into buying consumables. Any soul your character has ever had gets added to this number. And this is how they matchmake you against other players, the primary stat. So gone should be somebody with max level stuff stomping you at level 10. It should be mostly gone. we'll have to see how it really plays out, especially now that it's out on PC, as there's going to be hackers. It's going to happen. We just have to see how it actually plays out. So this is what the soul memory is. Quite good. I approve of it overall. Alright, so we got that. Stamina, negative stamina, okay. Dark Souls 2, compared to Dark Souls 1, has a much more... a greater focus on stamina management. As I go through my stamina here, and I run completely out, you'll notice there's a minor stop window there, where I'm waiting for my stamina to start recovering. What's actually happening there is when I'm casting my final swing, since it's more stamina than I have, it's putting me into a negative stamina state, where I have to wait for that negative stamina to start to refill before my bar will actually refill on itself. This is mostly important when you're fighting somebody with a big heavy hitter, where you can do, you'll do a few attacks and then you have your shield up, and they're going to smack your shield and put you into negative stamina quite a bit. And it'll kind of stagger you, it'll leave you slowed down and everything. So managing your stamina and making sure you don't go into negative stamina is a very key part to Dark Souls, at least for my playstyle. I constantly watch it. For the people that are greedy and always going for that extra attack, if you don't kill them with your extra attack and you're out of stamina, the game's going to punish you for it. So in some ways, your stamina bar is almost as important, in some cases more important, than your health bar. Because if you're out of stamina, your health bar is going to get drained. They're going to hit you. You're not going to be able to roll or any of that. Now, stamina itself has been somewhat changed. Well, no, that's not true. Stamina itself hasn't changed. I just wanted to point out that stamina is regenerated or the rate of regeneration is based on your equip load. So if we take off all of our gear here, and we waste our stamina, I'm going to let you know as soon as it starts to regen. Now, so 1001, 1002, right about 2 seconds to fully regen, depending on how I got my timing down there. But about 2 seconds to regen from 0 stamina with no weight load on. Right? So 1001, 1002, right around 2 seconds. If we then put gear on, really heavy gear, and rings do have weight now. So that was why I took the rings off also. Rings have weight. Nope. And I think those are the ones I was wearing. And then we got our sword and our shield. Nope. And then we're going to put on some heavy armor here. We're going to get up to 100%, hopefully. So we'll try to stay just under 100 so we're not overly encumbered. 86%. Is there anything heavier I can put on? I bet the Drangleic helmet's heavy. 92%. That'll work. And then we can throw a bow in there too. 94. And our catalyst. 98.5. Okay. Now 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004. So about 3.5, 4 seconds compared to 2. I'll give you an idea that your equip load affects how fast your stamina recovers. Equip load has been somewhat changed around. If we come in here down in the lower right hand corner, you're going to see this 45.3 out of 46, 98.5%. That is your equip load. In Dark Souls 1, the breakpoints were 33% and then 66%. You were trying to stay underneath those marks in order to adjust your roll. So if you notice here, if I roll, I got the real fat guy roll. If I take off all my gear, I'm obviously going to have the quick roll. Take that off. And there we go, we're down to 28%. There's the quick roll. So I was talking about agility and how that does a quick roll, or affects how quickly you roll. Anything under 70%, you're going to do this quick roll, as long as you're under 70% equip load. So if we put my normal gear back on, what was it? I was wearing the leather stuff, I think. This guy has this chick has no points in vitality, or not vitality, whatever, the equip load one. Now I roll, what am I at? I'm at, oops, 56.4%. It's still the quick roll. let's try to put that up a little bit. We'll try to get right up to 70%. Let's see, 65.9, 68.5, maybe a heavier. 70, perfect. Okay, we're at 70. Still the crit roll, right? But if we go just a bit over 70, that's 77, 71.8. Now it's fat guy roll. So as you can see, the actual roll is affected by gear still, but only at 70%. However, what weight does still affect is how far you roll. So, if we, let's try, we'll say if we stand here on this rock, and I push forward and roll, you notice I come up kind of, alright, so in this grass just before that dirt area. If I take off, let's go back to my other pants. This is probably going to be very hard to tell. So we're back to our fast roll. We stand here and... So we gained another half step. Not all that easy to show, but if I take everything off, it'll be a little more obvious. Alright. Get on the stone. Come on. Why are you misbehaving? And roll. Quite noticeably different. So, your weapon, your equip load, if under 70%, affects how far you roll. It affects your distance. Once you break 70%, you're going to be fat rolling anyway. Agility, as you increase that, you will roll faster and faster. You also consume things faster and faster, and so forth. So that's those changes. The healing system, I'll talk about that as we play through the game. There's also been... I don't want this video running overly long. It's probably longer than I want it to be already, and I'm only about halfway through. So in original Dark Souls, there was a system they had created for the game with its weapon emulation or damage model called the direct damage system. And what it took into account was when you were using a weapon like a halberd or great axe or something with a long handle on it, if you hit with the handle rather than the head of the weapon, your damage was reduced. If you hit with the weapon head, you did noticeably more damage. This has been carried over to Dark Souls 2, however, it now applies to every weapon in the game. It still has the greatest effect on halberds, long-handled axes, scythes. Items like that still have the greatest effect from this system. However, if you use a sword, even like the Zweihander, if you remember, the Zweihander has kind of that sheath part towards the lower hilt. If you hit with that, it's going to do reduced damage. If you have a thrusting sword and you kind of just glance and you click toward the blade rather than the tip, it's going to do reduced damage. For new players, just keep this in mind when you're thinking of a weapon to use. Using something like a sword like this, where clearly, as long as you hit, you're hitting with almost the ideal part of the blade, your damage is going to be far more consistent. Or an item like the maces here, where as long as you hit with the head of the mace, you're going to be doing pretty good damage. It's just something to keep in mind. The halberds and everything, the pikes, they're going to be more advanced users using those. Well, so let's, alright, while we're doing that, let's go ahead and, whoops, yeah, I don't want that, I want that, and that, okay. So, I spoke earlier in a video, and you might have known this from before, they wanted to improve how well you could use bows and crossbows in-game. They wanted to make them viable primary weapon options. Now, in my opinion, they have improved them, but they're not viable primary weapon options. What they've done is you can now, something you could not do before, you can actually move while drawing a bow. You move at a much reduced speed, only about quarter speed, but you can actually do it. The other thing you can do, I'm actually going to throw some armor on here because we're going to go fight some piggies to demonstrate this. There's my hat. And my leather armor, my leather gloves, and my leather boots. There we go. Oh, my rings. I should probably put a sword on too in case I need to really fight and not die. There. And I apologize. This is Taking longer than I wanted. But I feel this is good information, and this way I don't have to cover this again in the game later on. Okay. So, first thing, we can move even while we are still in first-person mode, but you do, again, you move very slow. You can also lock targets on something. Whoops. Helps if I use the right key. And while locked on, aim with your bow. So it is more viable, but it's still not ideal, mainly because you move so slow when you're actually firing the arrows. And this also does apply for crossbows. Whoops. If I get the right crossbow one. There we go. So you can see I can have my crossbow out and be aiming and still shoot. Alright, let's get rid of that. Let's kill these piggies off. I'll just continue to talk while I'm killing them. The other change, and maybe this was in Dark Souls and I never figured it out, you can do crosshair aiming with a crossbow. By default, the way crossbows are used, since you have them cocked and loaded, and you just tap the bumper and it fires, right? And then it reloads. I could never figure out how to aim them. And I don't know if this was in the original Dark Souls, but it does work in Dark Souls 2. The way you do a crosshair aiming for a crossbow, you want to two-hand the weapon. So rather than tapping Y or triangle, I'm going to hold Y or triangle. Now I'm two-handing the weapon. Now I can use crosshairs with a crossbow. So that is something that is available like so. Torches. Torches have been added into the game. For the most part, I think this was a lot of hype for something that did not have a lot of substance. There are a few cases where they do come in handy, but for the most part, they're just pretty. If we look here in the center of the screen here, you'll see a torch with 46 minutes 32 seconds. This is real time. Every time you pick up a torch, it'll add like 5 minutes to this. So if we go get a torch, we'll go up to 51 minutes 32 seconds, then 56 minutes, and everything. And as we come up to a bonfire, you see we have this option to toggle. It's Y for my controller. We're going to light this torch. And now I have a torch. And I can use this to block. I can also use L2 to actually swing with it. For enemies that are weak against fire, that can be helpful. It's not great, but it can be helpful. Mainly what this can be used for is they've set up around the world a bunch of braziers. I think there might be some down in here. Right there was one actually we just passed. That one was already lit though. But I believe there's a brazier in here that we can then light. And it'll leave a light source for us for later on. I'm not seeing one. Anyway, there'll be these braziers all around the place. They're in almost every single zone. Even zones that are fully lit and don't need them, you'll occasionally find a brazier. And you'll walk up to with your torch and you'll be able to light it. And then later on, you can go back to that brazier and relight your torch from that. Is there any down here? No, nope, of course there's none here. Just to make a liar out of me, it doesn't put any here. Yeah, that figures. So once a brazier is lit, you can go back and reuse that in order to relight your torch. So you don't have to run all the way back to a bonfire in order to light your torch and everything, which is quite handy. I will tell you there's also some enemies that this helps out with too. And lastly, about the torches, there is an item you can pick up in-game called, what are they, fireflies? Some type of fireflies. Something to that effect. They're basically a consumable that when you use that consumable, it'll instantly light your torch for you. So you don't always have to go back to a brazier or a bonfire if you're out in the middle of nowhere and you need some light source. For the most part, torches are There have been some minor changes to spells, mainly dark spells. Is it dark? Is that the right? Yeah, dark spells. So dark spells were added into Dark Souls 1 with the Abyss Walker DLC, the, what is it, Artorias of the Abyss or whatever. The DLC added in a whole separate tree of magic and spells and everything that were called dark spells, dark magic. They are back in Dark Souls 2. They've been renamed hexes. They've been changed up a little bit though. While they're still mostly basically high-powered seeker spells and everything, Where in Dark Souls 1, they were standard sorceries that used int in order to equip them and attunement slots and everything. Hexes now, or the new dark magic, focus entirely or are made of a mix of both int and faith. So for most of them, like if you're look at a standard hex, unfortunately I don't have any to show you, you're going to have like 15 int and then like 18 faith, or 20 faith and then 22 int, or 20 faith, 20 int. In order to efficiently use hexes, you're going to have to level a class that is both faith and int heavy. So it's a very heavy tree invested in that route. Doesn't leave you a whole lot for strength or dexterity early on to give you a melee weapon. Just something to keep in mind. The other minor change is miracles. So holy faith-based spells are now cast using, right here, chimes instead of catalysts. So this is the new, the change of the catalyst for priests. You're going to be looking at chimes. Let's go through the consumables real quickly while we're here. This way I don't have to go through them all later on in game. Obviously, human effigies. This is your new humanity. You pick these up, they will restore your humanity. Don't need to be consumed at a bonfire. Anywhere you are, if you're dead, pop that. It will restore your humanity. However, it will not heal you like humanities used to. Life gems are the new heal over time. These are to augment off your Estus Flask. Healing items, we'll leave that for the main game. They've introduced new sets of items, these herbs. This is just the lowest rank ones. These will restore spell uses. So if you're going with a very heavy spellcaster build, you no longer have to go back to bonfires every time in order to restore your spells. You can carry these herbs with you and consume them along the way, and they will restore you. And they do come in different varieties. Some of the varieties will restore all of them at once. Some will restore like 10%. Some of them restore about 50%. It varies, but these are the lowest level ones. Might as well talk about curses real quick. Curse has been changed. In Dark Souls 1, when you got cursed, you died instantly, came back with 50% health, and you had to get that curse removed from you either via an item that was relatively expensive or through the guy that did pardons. I can't remember his name. He could remove curses also, but it was a big deal. Curses now are basically like dying without dying. You lose your humanity one tick at a time. So similar to if you die, you lose 10% of your health. If you get cursed, you don't actually die, you just lose 10% of your health. If you get cursed the second time, you lose 20%, you're down 20% of your health. 30%, 40%, 50%. Once you get down to that 50% mark, if you then get cursed again, then you die instantly, and you come back completely hollowed at 50% health. You can remove the effects of curse just by consuming a human effigy and restoring your humanity back to normal. There are also consumable items that will remove it, like this guy right here, the Divine Blessing. Stamina recovery, that's pretty standard. Homeward Bones, standard. They've added in a few additional throne items, like these Holy Water Urns and these Witching Urns. They're basically like fire bombs, but they do magic damage or holy damage instead. They've brought back Aromatic Ooze. This was in Demon Souls. This adds magic damage to your weapons, similar to Pine Resin. I don't have any gold Pine Resin, apparently. But it's just a weapon buff that you use. It's a consumable item. Repair Powder. Repair Powder early on can be nice for people that are using low damage weapons, so they can make it from bonfire to bonfire, as we discussed the durability earlier. Silver Talisman. This is Chameleon Spell, just in a consumable form. It'll just turn you into a random... Well, let's use one. There we go. We're Narrow Barrel. Whee! And we get hide. These are fun for when you get invaded. You can do weird things and then let people run by and then run out and attack them. Yeah. They're little silly items. I like it, but okay. Rusted Coins. You'll find some of these throughout the world as you're playing through the game. Rusted Coin can be consumed, increases your item discovery chance for a set amount of time. I want to say it's 12 minutes, it might be 15. Lloyd's Talisman, we know this from Dark Souls 1. It reduces, blocks Estus Flasks, or can put mimics to sleep. white sign soapstone and small white sign. So the white sign soapstone, we know this from the old game. This is how you put down your name to be summoned in for co-op, to offer yourself up for co-op. So if you're doing co-op, there's, what did I figure, 4 ways that you end up, you either succeed or fail and get returned back to your world. If you enter in and you die, you fail and you get returned back to your world. If your host dies, you fail, you get returned back to your world. If your host, if you kill a boss while there, you succeed, you get returned back to your world, and you gain a token of fidelity. The other thing is, someone can summon you in early on in a level, and you'll spend, I believe, 12 minutes with them in level, and it might be 15. As you work through, after 12 or 15 minutes, you will then despawn and go back. If you manage to kill enough stuff and assist the players enough throughout that time period, you will then succeed and get a token of fidelity. I'm not exactly sure the limits on that. But basically, you can no longer stay with somebody indefinitely. Once that time limit is hit, you're going to be desummoned. There's nothing you can do about it. The difference between these two, the small white sign soapstone, the time limit's even shorter. It's only like 6 minutes instead of 12 minutes. Cracked red-eyed orb allows you to invade guilty players, so somebody that's gone against a covenant. Cracked red-eye orb allows you just to invade other players to kill them. This item's been around for a while. If you're assisting someone in co-op and you got to get out of there real quick, you can use this to return to your world or banish people who are helping you in co-op. It does not send red phantoms back, just white or blue or yellow, I believe. Bone of the Order, or Bone of Order. This item is kind of odd. Very interesting item. I had to actually look it up on the wiki to find out exactly what it does. So, if you're playing through the game and you get invaded, and you freak out and you pop your internet connection and you disconnect, or you real quickly hit start and quit game to avoid the invasion, your account gets flagged. Now, if you do this over and over, I don't have the exact number, but if you do this a bunch of times, eventually the game will mark you as someone that is quitting out of PvP, and you will no longer be able to summon in players for co-op. All of the yellow soapstone signs or white soapstone signs will stop appearing if you do this. You can use this item once to reset that status. This item is only attainable once per character ever. Even if you go to a New Game Plus, you will not get a second one. So basically it's saying, you know what, if you don't want to do PvP, don't play online. That's what this basically is. If you're going to play online and you're going to get help from other players, you're going to use the white and yellow soapstones, then you also have to deal with the invasions. You can't do the co-op without doing the PvP, is basically what this shows up as. Token of Fidelities, rewards for co-op, Soul Vessel. So there's 2 last items I'm going to cover. Obviously I don't have one of them because we've covered everything else. Soul Vessels are essentially a respec. If we go to travel, I apologize, this video is getting long, but I've talked a lot and there's a lot of things to cover here. But it'll mean later on I don't have to talk about this all again. So if we come in here, we can talk to this lady.
Still determined.
Yeah. And give her the Soul Vessel. Doing this will restore our class back to its original starting. So you see it took our Vigor back down to 4, took our Endurance down to 8, and all this. Allowing us, it reallocated our 40 soul levels back to us, where we can then go through and put them back out there. It's a respec. 2 things to note. One, you have to I guess one thing to note, you have to reallocate all 40. If you only reallocate like 5 of them and then try to complete, it won't let you complete. It doesn't restore the souls that you consumed to make this. It just gives you the points back to be respent. If you don't spend them all, nothing happens. Right? You can't confirm here. I can spam A all day. It's not going to let me go. And then I can hit B and back out, and I'll get this back without re-leveling. And you're going to come across
Of course not.
several of those throughout a playthrough. I think 4 or 5 in each playthrough for that. And one of them you get fairly early. So if you're not sure of a build, you want to try something out, go ahead, try that build out. If need be, you can always go back. You can use one of those soul vessels, respec, and do it all over again. And try something that works for you better. The last item I'm going to talk about for consumable items and everything is the bonfire aesthetic. So, if we look down here, we come in here to the travel. And you look, if we click in here and look at this right here, the travel point, you'll see this number 1. Right here's a number 1, here's a number 1, number 1. What this is representing is the current New Game Plus difficulty, or the game difficulty of that world. How kindled that fire is going to be. So, you may have caught on in an earlier video if you watched any of my lead up for Dark Souls. Let me get a drink of water. I talked about how mobs stop spawning, most mobs, after a certain point. I would say about 95% of them. If you kill the same mob 12 times, it'll stop spawning. It just won't be there anymore. What they've done is you can no longer infinitely farm zones. After the 12th kill, if you want to kill that mob again, you have to burn an item called a bonfire ascetic. So in here there's this option to burn items, and you can burn if we had one, it would be in this list here. It'd be a bonfire ascetic. And what that does is it places that bonfire in the zone of influence around that bonfire essentially into New Game Plus mode. And it'll respawn all those enemies. They'll all have 12 kills available, but they're tougher. So if you want to farm a zone over and over again, you're going to have to, every time, after every 12th kill, you're going to have to make the game a little bit tougher. And it's not just tougher as in those mobs aren't just stronger, it adds in more enemies. So you're going to have more red phantoms in there, you're going to have some more random stuff happen and everything. It's playing that zone almost entirely in New Game Plus. I say almost because there are still some slight differences between New Game Plus and Bonfire Ascetic 1 zones. Slight differences. They're 98% the same, but there are some minor differences between the two. And I also say most enemies you'll need to do this for. There are a few exceptions. There's a few enemies that are only there once, that if you're going to want to farm them, you're going to have to use a bonfire ascetic each time. They only spawn once. They're similar to bosses. There's also, I want to say, a rare 2 or 3 that respawn infinitely. Very rare. There's a few very rare guys that do respawn. So that's what the bonfire ascetic goes for. And that's the last consumable item, really, if I had one. It is also, bonfire ascetics are one of the possible items you can select in your character to creation. It is one of the options. And that's going to lead me into game difficulty. So, we're going to cover this hopefully very, very quick, as most of this will go in the review where I talk about it. But there is an additional option up here. I was headed there anyway. There is this slab that we can pray at, and we can join a covenant. This covenant will instantly up the difficulty of the game. So right here, Neil, enter Covenant Victor Stone. If we come in here, this will set you upon an arduous path. Okay to join this covenant. If you join that covenant, the whole game doesn't quite go into New Game Plus, but it goes into a tougher mode. So if you're somebody that's really looking for a challenge, you want to give that a try. And just a general rundown. In my opinion, 80% of Dark Souls 1, or I'm sorry, 80% of Dark Souls 2 is easier than Dark Souls 1. Only about 20% of it, at least the basic, the original, brand new game playthrough is easier. Only about 15% of it is on the same difficulty, and then there's maybe about 5% that's actually a little more difficult than the original Dark Souls. Maybe. I mean, that's all perspective. If you have the right loadouts, it might be easy, it might be the same difficulty or whatever. But in general, the first playthrough of the original Dark Souls, or of Dark Souls 2, is a little bit easier than Dark Souls 1. For those people that are fanatics about the game, really want that difficulty, they have put in place ways of making the game harder. Via that covenant we just looked at, via Bonfire Ascetics, via New Game Plus up to 9. So if you're concerned about that, don't be. The game can still get very, very difficult. You just got to tell it, hey, I want a greater challenge, and it'll give you that greater challenge. Okay, one last quick note before we cut this video off. The last thing is going to be hidden walls, illusionary walls, and so forth. And we'll get into the... do I even want to go into this? You know what? No, this video's gone on long enough. I don't need to cover all that. Just know there's a change. That'll be in the walkthrough and everything. But that should set us up now. I'm going to start recording the primary playthrough and everything, and I won't have to go into all this stuff as I play the game, which should hopefully make things flow better. And I hope you guys will join me there for the walkthrough. To any of those that watched the first few episodes that went up already, and they're going to be going down and then back up again in a different format, I apologize. You can probably jump right to episode 4 or 5, whatever you're at, without missing much. I'm going to explain a few things differently, going to play through a little differently, but it's going to be mostly the same thing. So, till then, this has been Power. Thanks for watching.